Okay, so I'm going to start letting people in.
Sounds good.
King?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you guys hear me well?
Yep.
Okay, because I was hearing an echo, so I wasn't sure. Present. Okay. Okay, hold on. Let me know if you can see my presentation screen.
Yep.
Okay. All right, cool. Cool. All right. So King, you can start letting people in.
Deji, screen sharing is still disabled for me.
Okay. Perfect. How about now?
Yep, I can do that now. Okay, perfect.
Perfect. Okay, so King, you can let everyone come into the room now.
I think I don't have the option to let people in here on my end.
Okay. Okay. I'll just admit all of them. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. If you can hear me, please put a message on the chat box so I know that you can hear me. Perfect. Thanks everyone for coming through. So we're just going to give a few minutes for others to join. Okay, so how's everyone's day going? Because of the number of people that would be joining, I hope everyone will be able to use the chat group. So let's blow up the chat group as much as possible. How's everyone's evening going? Hey, Grisha, how are you doing? All the thanks should be directed to the Calvert team. I'm very well. Thanks for joining. Okay, so I see that we are at 7 and we have quite a lot to cover today. So in a couple of minutes, I will kick this off, and then anyone who joins would have to admit them in. Okay, so King, I will just make you the host. Okay. So King, so now you are the host. Can you check if you are able to let people in? Perfect. Okay, guys, so I'm just going to kick this off. So let me know if you guys can see my screen. So I have the presentation here on my screen. So can everyone see my screen? Perfect. Okay, guys, so thank you very, very much for joining us today. I want to say a very good evening to everyone. Thank you very, very much for joining us. So we have quite a lot to cover today. And what we want to do is we want to let you know right out of the bat that this is a 2-hour session. So we would get right on with things. We are already 2 minutes into the hour. So we will try to accelerate as much as possible. We have a lot to get through, but we will try our best to see how we can compress all the content that we have within these 2 hours. So just a quick introduction. My name is Deji, and I will be your host for today. Some of you might know me. I run a wholesaling business called Deals Estate, and I'm also the host of the Deals Estate Wholesaling podcast. And for me, I don't know if you can tell, I am super excited that, we are doing this today, and I'm more excited about what we're going to learn today. So before we get into the weeds of things, I want to share some house rules. And I think it's very important to set the groundwork and just get things going. So in terms of house rules, for duration, this is a 2-hour webinar. And as much as we sent a survey to ask, what the preferred length of the webinar would be, I know a lot of people wanted to do this for like an hour, but the content we have, we were not able to put it within an hour. So this is going to be 2 hours. We're going to try to ensure that we finish as soon as possible. But outside of that, we have a lot to cover, and we hope you stay with us to the end. The second one is recording. So as you have noticed, we are recording this session, and we also happen to be live streaming it as well. The third one is question and answers. Now, if anyone has any questions all through this session, please put it on the chat box. One of our team members would collate all the questions, and at the end of the session, when we have the Q&A, we would answer all the questions. And if your questions are not there, we would also give room for everyone to ask that question, so no one is going to be left. We also have an opportunity to collect your feedback. So this is the first time we're doing a webinar like this, but it's going to be the first of many. So we want to ensure that we have your feedback. We want to know the things that we did well and the things that we didn't do well, so that for the next one, it's even better. And the last, or not the least, is social media. Just a bit of engagement before we start. I want to find out in the room, because I want to get a sense of who we have here. How many people have either found or financed or facilitated an off-market deal in the past? So if you've done any of 3 of them, just put it in the comment section. So when I mean, have you found an off-market deal? So you could be a wholesaler, you could be a bird dog, you could be a realtor. When I say financed, I mean, you could be a mortgage broker, you could be a JV partner, you could be a private lender who has financed an off-market deal. And when I say facilitated, I mean a service provider. So you could be a lawyer who has transacted on an off-market deal. You could be a contractor who has worked on an off-market deal. You could be an inspector. If you fall into any of these buckets, can you put in the chat there and just say, found or financed or facilitated? I just want to get a sense of okay, so I can't really see the chat, but so I guess, can you keep me honest? So are people responding in the chat there? Okay. perfect. So I wanted to check for myself. All right, guys. So the reason why I asked is because we wanted to actually do something quite interesting here, which is we want to invite a couple of you onto our podcast. So we have 3 episodes that we want to give away. And by giving away, we mean the podcast is built on the premise of finding, financing, and facilitating off-market deals. So if you found an off-market deal, we would like to invite you on to share your experience about finding an off-market deal. If you financed one, we would like to invite you on to share your experience. And likewise, if you facilitated one, we would like to invite you on to share your experience. So in order to qualify for this, we would just like that everyone, go through this. You could scan this QR code that says Deals Estate. It would take you to our Instagram page. Alternatively, one of our team members is pasting a link on the chat right now. So you could either scan or you could click the link. It will take you to the page. All you need to do is follow Deals Estate, go to your stories, share your experience. So if you found a deal, share your experience finding a deal on the stories, tag Deals Estate. Likewise, if you facilitated or financed a deal, just share your experience doing that, tag Deals Estate. We would go through all the story posts, we would reshare them, and we would pick one out of each 3 buckets. And we would pick probably the catchiest one, or the one that's most interesting. And we would invite that person on our podcast. So, this is just to keep everyone's fingers on the pulse, to keep this very, very engaging. So if you guys could do that for a minute, that would be great. Scan the QR code or click the link, follow Deals Estate, share your experience, tag us, and then post it on your Instagram stories. Okay. So while we are doing that, I wanted to just give you a run through of what the agenda is going to look like, just to manage everyone's expectations. So again, this is a 2-hour webinar. So we would appreciate if you stay with us till the very end. So the first hour is going to be about content. It's going to be a content rush. We're going to throw a lot of bombs at you. Chris is going to do a fantastic job. Just believe me, he's going to speak about data analysis, and he's going to show us a case study of actually appraising the property. And that's going to be in the first hour. In the second hour, it's going to be more engagement, getting to know each other. After this webinar, we just want to ensure that we keep in touch, we get your feedback, we know what we did wrong, what we did right, so that for the next one, we are doing things better. So this is the run through of how the next 2 hours would look like. And without further ado, I wouldn't spend too much time introducing myself because, I already did that. The man of the hour is the person that you guys, signed up to listen to. I want to say a big thank you to Chris for agreeing to do this. And thank you to the Calvert team for also agreeing to do this. Just a little bit of information about Chris. Chris is an appraiser, has years of experience, joined the Calvert team last year. He's a member of the Canadian National Association of Real Estate Appraisers. Guys, looking at his profile, this is very, very intimidating. If this does not intimidate you, then I don't know what will. So I think at this point, I just need to, hand off to Chris. So everyone just put a comment on the chat, put fireballs on the chat for Chris, and let's welcome him here.
Thank you, Deji. Making sure, can you see my screen there, Deji?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. All right. So today we're going to just give a presentation on how to analyze off-market deals. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I know it's a busy summer evening. So Deji introduced me. I've been a real estate appraiser for 8 years. Working with Calvert for just over a year now. Calvert Home Mortgage, for those of you who don't know, is an alternative lender. We operate currently in Alberta and Ontario. And our focus is ensuring our clients' financial success. So we like to work quickly We like to help you get your deals done, and we like to make sure you're profitable. And part of that starts with providing the right advice. So I hope that's something that we are able to cover tonight. The agenda, just a bit of a more detailed agenda on what I'll be going through. I'm going to review a bit of appraisal theory, go through approaches to value, talk about market trends, and go over some best practices for choosing comparables. I believe we have a break scheduled then, and then when we come back from that, we'll go through a case study on a single family residential valuation. And then if we have time, we'll go through a multifamily overview and some common mistakes that I see that real estate investors and buyers make when valuing properties. And as Deji mentioned, please send any questions through the chat and we'll tackle those at the end of the webinar. So why are we here today? I assume most of you are real estate investors. So we're in this business to make a profit, and accurately understanding property values will directly affect your profitability. Markets are constantly changing and it's impossible to time the market. So best practices will help you reduce mistakes and increase profit on each deal and minimize any losses you might experience when increasing markets shift into a declining market like we experienced last year. Just so we're all on the same page here, I'm going to go over some key terminology, some words I will use frequently as we go through this presentation. Market value is the most probable price that a property will sell for on the open market. Assessment value, this is an approximation of market value by your city or municipality. Sometimes it's similar to market value, but most of the time it's not. Subject property would be the property that we're valuing. Improvements would be anything that isn't the lot or the vacant land. That would be your dwelling, garage, landscaping, decking, fencing, items like that. Effective age, this is the market's perception of the age of your property, which is very different from your actual age. So a property that was built, say, in the year 2000 would have an actual age of 23 years, but its effective age would probably be somewhere between 10 to 15 years. And this is because different components of the property will age at different rates. Your foundation, for example, really doesn't age very quickly at all, but features like flooring and counters and paint would age a lot quicker and need to be replaced quicker. Dwelling style classification. This is to make sure we're comparing apples to apples in the market. So one-story properties are typically bungalows, bi-levels, and 3 to 4 level splits. So if your subject is a bungalow, you want to make sure you're only comparing it to those types of properties. And then the same thing for 2 stories, which would be anything that's more than 1 level above grade, 1.5 to 3-story properties and 5 level splits. As is value, this would be the value of your property in its current as is state. ARV is an acronym for after renovation value, which is a common term in the flipping business, also referred to as an as if complete value. And this would be the value of a property after you've completed the renovations, but we generally look at that value before we start that process. Bracketing is a sales comparison analysis term that's used in appraisal, and it refers to selecting comparable properties that have features that are inferior, similar, and superior to your subject's features. And we'll get into that term more later in the presentation. So first off, we want to focus again on market value. When valuing a property, we want to focus on market value and not the highest possible price. So what is market value? It's the most probable price that a property should bring in a competitive and open market when both the buyer and seller are acting prudently and knowledgeably, and assuming that there are no undue stimulus on the property. Some examples of undue stimulus would be foreclosure, power of sale, maybe a distressed seller, bidding wars, and private sales usually transact below market value. And it's always a good idea to remember that one sale does not make a market. So assessment value is a term that comes up a lot when we're talking about market value and when people are wondering what the current market value is of their property. Generally, this does not equal market value, and it's not a consideration that's used in the appraisal process very often. It can be higher or lower than market value. And in the Ontario market, Assessment values have been much lower than market values for a number of years. And the main reason for this is that MPAC hasn't updated your assessment values since 2016. So I attended a webinar a few months ago by MPAC, and the word is that they will be updating assessment values this year sometime, but they didn't give a firm deadline. So before we can get to the appraisal process and looking at how you choose comps and make adjustments and all that, the first step is you want to know your subject. If we don't understand what our subject is, we won't be able to accurately select comparable sales. So what are the location influences? What are the zoning requirements of your property? Is the city changing zoning requirements in the near term? This happens a lot more in the inner city when neighborhoods are transitioning from older 100-year-old homes into new construction properties. What improvements are there on your site? How large is the dwelling? And what is the condition of the features of the dwelling? Does it need a new roof, furnace, flooring, etc.? It's good to understand all these features of your property before you go looking to select comparable properties in the market. So in appraisal, there are 3 approaches to value. There's the direct comparison approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. We're primarily going to focus on the comparison approach today, as it's generally best reflects buyers and sellers in the market for single family and small door multifamily properties. We'll not spend too much time on the other approaches, but I will give a bit of a high level overview of them. So the direct comparison approach, this approach compares the subject property to similar properties that have recently transacted. The sale prices of properties that are considered most comparable will indicate a value range within which the subject property's value will fall. It's primarily based on an appraisal principle called the principle of substitution. And what this generally means is that when there are 2 or more similar properties available on the market, the one with the lesser price will likely receive the greatest attention from potential buyers. The direct comparison approach also uses another principle called the principle of contribution. And this principle is demonstrated in the adjustment grid of a single family appraisal report. So it's the basis of how we do adjustments to comparable properties. For example, a downwards adjustment is made to a comparable if a sale has a superior feature to the subject, and conversely, an upwards adjustment is made to a sale if it has an inferior feature to the subject. The purpose of adjustments in the sale comparison approach is to try and make our chosen comparable sales as similar to the subject as possible. And once you've completed those steps, your adjusted values of your comparables should suggest a value for your subject. For the cost approach, as I said, we'll just go over this really briefly. This approach considers land and building components separately and then adds them back together. The cost to replace the subject improvements is called the replacement cost new. And understanding the cost approach can be an important factor for analyzing building construction and quality. And often comparable sales that are very similar to your subject are not available in the market. And a good understanding of the cost approach should increase the accuracy of adjustments made in the comparison approach. But for our purposes, we'll focus on the comparison approach today. The third approach to value is the income approach. And this approach is a methodology that's used to estimate the value of income producing properties. And we'll cover the income approach in a bit more detail later in the presentation. So at this point, we've gone over how you should know your subject. So we're assuming it's a single family residential property. So we're going to be using the comparison approach to value it. The next step would be choosing comparable sales in your market. An important step in this methodology is bracketing. I mentioned this term earlier. Bracketing is a best practice to choose comparables that are similar, inferior, and superior to your subject features. Ideally, you want to select comparables that are the same as your subject, but those are almost never available. Therefore, you'll be forced to select comps with attributes that differ from your subject. Some attributes will be similar, some will be superior. It is important to choose comps that have both inferior and superior attributes. If done well, when you're done selecting comps that bracket your subject, this should reduce your margin of error and provide you with an approximate value range for your subject property. Another important factor to consider when choosing comparables is to evaluate your own bias. We all think that our property is superior to others, and your analysis of the subject and the selection of comparable sales will only be as good as your ability to eliminate that bias. I think as an example, perhaps your neighbor's house down the street just sold for $1 million and you are certain that your property is superior. They haven't even landscaped their front yard as well as yours. But what you don't know is that your neighbor's house is actually a few hundred square feet larger, which is very hard to tell from the street level. The added value of your landscaping is nothing compared to your higher square footage of your neighbor's property. So some positive features that you highly value may not be valued the same by the market. And conversely, adverse features that you don't mind, may significantly detract from a property's value. Moving on to specific attributes that you want to consider when choosing comparables. Market trends and date of sale. If prices are generally stable and are not increasing or decreasing, it may be okay to choose more dated sales. But if the market is increasing or decreasing, especially rapidly, you're going to want to choose sales that transacted much more recently. So in the last 30 or 60 or 90 days. Neighborhood. You want to try to choose sales that are located as close to your subject as possible. When determining neighborhoods, appraisers generally go by MLS boundaries. This may be something that's hard to determine as a real estate investor if you don't have direct access to that information. So that's why you just want to try and stay as close to your subject as possible when you're choosing comparable sales. Property rights. Properties can have different ownership rights, freehold, leasehold, condo, or strata rights. You want to make sure when you choose comparable sales that they have the same property rights as your subject. You don't want to be choosing or comparing a freehold property to a condo. Zoning and highest and best use. Generally, you want to choose sales with the same zoning, but similar zoning allowances are also okay. Lot size and shape. Generally, you want to choose lots that are similar in shape. If you're comparing an interior lot on a street that's rectangular, you generally don't want to compare it to a pie lot. In inner city, lot values can be much higher due to the redevelopment potential, and you want to choose lots that are similar in size. Occupancy. This is especially important in Ontario. Tenant-in properties can adversely affect market value. It can be tough to have a tenant leave your property when selling. It can also be hard to get a timely hearing at the landlord-tenant board to resolve any issues. And vacant properties may also indicate a distressed sale if they've been on the market for a long time. Dwelling type, we briefly went through that before. You always want to compare apples to apples. So compare two stories to two stories, bungalows to bungalows, and so on. GLA, this is your house size or square footage. When you're choosing comps, generally you want to keep them within 10% of your subject size. So if your subject is a 2,000 square foot house, generally you don't want to choose comps that are smaller than 1,800 square feet or larger than 2,200 square feet. That's not always possible, but again, we're trying to choose the best comparables we can. Quality of construction is another attribute to consider. Some of the terms that are used in the industry are like starter homes, move up, estate, or luxury level quality. This can be harder to determine without a lot of experience, but generally when you stay within your own neighborhood or close to your subject, the quality of construction should remain similar. Age and condition. If your subject is renovated, you make sure you're choosing renovated sales on the market. And if your subject is older, make sure you're choosing older sales. Street location and influences or location influences. Maybe your subject's located on a busy street or backing a highway or near a railway or near an airport. If you have those influences on a property you're looking at purchasing, when you're evaluating its market value, you want to make sure you're choosing comps that are located close to those same influences so that you're not missing anything. So which attributes are most important? For most appraisers, generally the adjustments we make on a sales comparison grid would be date of sale, dwelling size, dwelling type, effective age, and any other unique features or location influences. So just going into that in a bit more detail, some location influences that can influence a lot's value in a positive manner. If it's backing onto a green belt or a park, if it has any views of mountains, water, or downtown. If your neighborhood has lakes or an atypical abundance of parks or green spaces in the area, those can just increase property values for that neighborhood as opposed to neighborhoods around them. Being closer to downtown will generally increase property values. Sometimes you have to be careful there. There will be neighborhoods near downtown which are less desirable. Zoning changes. Sometimes cities are rezoning areas near the inner city. And it's good to be aware of the changes that are happening in the municipality where you're making a purchase. Factors that can negative influence property's value. If it's located on a busy street or a traffic collector, a bus route, located near or backing a highway, railroad tracks, gas stations, auto shops, cell phone towers also adversely affect value. Multifamily is one that can vary wildly. If you're backing a high multifamily apartment, this would likely have adverse effect on your value. But if you're backing a townhouse, it might not be as big of an effect on your value. We'll move on to discussing market trends here. So a data point we track for where the market's going is a month called months of inventory. And what this is, it's the number of active listings divided by the number of sold listings between two dates. So if you currently have 90 active listings and you've had 30 sales in the last 3 months, then you're going to have, it's going to look like a seller or a buyer's market, sorry, because you're going to have lots of inventory. So generally, if that equation works out to about 3 months, you're in a balanced market. If it works out to less than 3 months, you're in a seller's market and prices are going to tend to increase. And if it's greater than 3 months, you're going to be in a buyer's market and prices tend to decrease. Just to provide some context, for the month of June in Ontario for single family properties, the months of inventory is ranging in between one to 2 months, which puts us in a buyer's market or a seller's market, sorry. This may seem counterintuitive with rising interest rates, but it seems like not a lot of people are listing their properties for sale right now, likely holding on to the lower interest rates they secured in the years before the Bank of Canada raised interest rates last year. Absorption rate is another term we use to track market trends. It's very similar to months of inventory, but it tracks sales to new listings rather than total active listings. So it's the number of new listings divided by sold listings between two dates. And a ratio around 50% suggests a balanced market. A higher ratio implies a seller's market, and a lower ratio implies a buyer's market. Because we're looking at new listings, this tends to be more of a leading indicator than months of inventory, well, although both are still lagging indicators. Another tool that we use to follow the market is the CREA Home Price Index. This is a public tool that's available to anybody. New data is released on the 15th of each month. This tracks changes in the value of a typical or benchmark property. I find this, and the industry, a lot of people in the industry find this superior to using average or median sale prices, as those can fluctuate wildly month to month. It's also a lagging indicator, and it's what a lot of appraisers use for time adjustments. So I mentioned a benchmark or typical property. So what is a typical property? This varies by neighborhood. The Korea Home Price Index estimates the size and features of a typical home. These assumptions are updated annually to ensure the benchmark attributes are up to date with the market and remain relevant over time. There's also a private tool that's accessible to realtors and appraisers. So again, this is something that you should use your power team for. Use your realtor if you have a relationship with an appraiser. They can provide you access to this type of data as well. The private MLS home price index tool is more granular, allows data tracking by neighborhood and by property category. This is just another slide that shows what the home price index tool can show you. For Hamilton, Burlington, a two-story single family property shows that the current benchmark price is about $976,000. A month ago, it was about 1% lower, and 5 years ago, it was, a month ago, it was 1% higher, and then 5 years ago, it was 50% or 58% lower. We'll just go through an example time adjustment here, just to show you guys how this works. So using the public HPI tool for the Hamilton Burlington area, we're looking at a two-story single family house. The original sale date and sale price we're going to assume. These are just made up numbers just for the ease of the calculation. Transacted in February 2022 for $1 million. So the HPI index at that time was 505.7, and the HPI index for the most recent date month that we have would be June 2023 was 411.1. So that works out to, it suggests that the market has declined 18.71% since that time. And if we look at the lowest point in the last year since the peak that was February 2022, was December 22, the HPI suggests that there was a decline of 26.75% over that time. So the market has rebounded a bit over the last 6 to 7 months, but still quite a decline from the peak of 2022. If you monitor data points like this each month, you should be able to make better decisions when market changes are starting to happen. So this slide here is showing the valuation sheet that we use internally at Calvert. This is where we populate the subject data and the comparable data and make adjustments. On the next slides, we'll get into a case study and show how the subject and comparable attributes can be reported on this document. But I believe we have a short break planned. May I give it back to you, Deji?
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. So we have a quick 5-minute break. Just want to get everyone's thoughts on how the webinar has been. So just put your comments on the chat. I would hand over to Chris in another 5 minutes to take us through the case study that we've prepared. It's going to be about a single family property, and he's actually going to go through the same process that he's walked us through. It will show us the subject property, it will show us the appraisal for the property, the comparables, and just the process of going through that data analysis. So before I hand over to Chris again, just wanted to get everyone's feedback on how the webinar has been. One of my team members would share a link on the chat. It's just a quick survey. I think it's only about 4 questions. We just want to get your thoughts on how the webinar has been. Again, we want to ensure that directionally we are adding value and we know how to correct things if there's any issues. So please, while we are waiting to hand over to Chris, if you have a minute, it will just take like a minute. You could fill that form and just give us your feedback on how the webinar has been since we started. We are about 40 minutes in now, so I think we're still good for time. So that's one. I also wanted to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please put the questions on the chat box so that we can start collating them ahead of the question and answer session that we have towards the end of the program. And then finally, also wanted to remind everyone of, if you are interested in being a guest on our podcast, we shared some of the steps, to tag us on social, share your stories, and our team would go through those stories, reshare them as well, and select, the three winners. So those are the things that I would like to share. I think we are good on time. So I would hand over to Chris, to continue with the presentation. He'll be walking us through a case study. Just want to ensure that everyone isn't overwhelmed with the information that we're sharing. We want to give you time to at least digest, the content that's being shared. And we also apologize if the speed of delivery is high. We just want to ensure that we manage everyone's time, and we try to finish this in a little under 2 hours. So without further ado, I think I can hand back to you, Chris, to take us through the case study that's we've prepared.
Great, thanks, Deji. All right, so for a case study, Deji selected a property in Hamilton on 112 Cope Street. I'll walk you through what I'm generally looking for when I'm valuing a property like this. Again, the attributes I'm generally looking at are neighborhood, location influences, dwelling style, effective age, and square footage. There are other attributes, but those are generally the most important ones. Another important detail to pay attention to on MLS listings when you're choosing comps is if the listing has photos and or a good description of the property. If a realtor hasn't provided photos or it has a poor description, it can be a very hard property to analyze. And even if you consider it very similar to your property, it's probably not a good data point to use. So here's a general location of the property. It's located in East Hamilton in the community of Homeside. Zoomed in view of the location. It's a corner lot located on Cope Street. That would be right here. And then it's also siding a busier street. I believe that was Roxborough Avenue. So I consider this an adverse influence. So here's some photos of the property. Just looking it over, looks like it's been renovated fairly substantially recently. It's got vinyl siding, newer windows, updated bathroom, updated flooring and kitchen. It's got pot lights in the living room. Did notice it has a bit of a kitchen in the basement, so it appears to have a legal suite. This property also has a unique feature. This room here and up here in this corner, just through these doors here, this is off the garage. So looking at the MLS history of this property, this room looks like it used to just be shop space off the garage, but the current homeowner decided to turn it into a living space. There's no, I could not find any approvals for this living space, so I would consider it to be illegal and just valued it as extra garage space. So just to summarize the attributes on this property, it's currently actively listed for $399,000. It's been on the market for 28 days. This was a couple days ago. The location, it's a corner lot. It's located on a quiet street, but it is siding a busy bus traffic collector street. For the site improvements, there's a garage with a shop, a couple asphalt driveways, a concrete patio, and some typical fencing and landscaping. For the dwelling, it's a detached bungalow. It's of average build quality. It has 2 beds and 2 full baths. There's 712 square feet above grade. was originally built in 1930. It appears substantially updated in the last 10 to 15 years. Appears to have a partial basement. The front area appeared to be an addition at some point in the past. There's a kitchen in the basement. However, the suite does not appear to be an approved use. As for extras, the property appears to have central air, a couple tiled showers, the second kitchen, and the concrete patio. So here is our valuation sheet populated with the subject data. I'll just give you guys a couple seconds to look at that. Basically displays all the attributes I mentioned on the previous slide. Moving on to choosing comparables. This is the area I chose to search for comparable sales in. I originally just searched in the community of Homeside, but there were not any sales that were on a busy street or siding a busy street. So I expanded my search a little bit. I narrowed it down to actives, conditional, closed, and pending sales in the last 180 days, and also narrowed it by detached style and bungalows and split levels. So what I was looking for was similarly renovated and sized dwellings, ideally with busy street influence. Even though I was searching properties in the last 180 days, ideally I'm picking sales in the last 90 days. The reason I expanded my search to 180 days was to hopefully find properties that had that busy street influence. And ideally, I'm looking for similar quality of finish and construction. So I ended up choosing 4 comparables. The industry standard is generally to choose a minimum of 3. You can choose 4, 5, 6, 10, 20, depending on how much time you want to put into analyzing these sales. The more you analyze, the more accurate your understanding of the market and your subject property will be, but it all comes down to time. Something to be noted about the Hamilton MLS board is that they typically provide a dwelling size on their listings. This isn't something that's common in Ontario. Many MLS boards won't provide any dwelling size at all. Others will just provide a range like 1,000 to 1,500 square feet, which is a very large range. It's 50% larger. So the Hamilton board is quite nice to us in that way. So here's where the comparables I chose are located in relation to the subject. And then we'll just go to the next slides, which show a little bit closer where they are. So the first comparable at 57 Fairfield is about a half kilometer away. The next one at 491 Britannia Ave is about a kilometer away, and that one's located on a busy street. Comparable 3, 264 Tragina is about a kilometer or half a kilometer away. And then my final 4th comparable is again about a kilometer away and located on a busy street again. Just going over the comparables a bit. So comparable 1, I considered it to be superior to the subject because it was located on a quiet street. The build and finish quality was higher. It's got a brick exterior. Looks like it was renovated more recently. It has a bit of a larger basement. Its effective age is lower. It is inferior in dwelling size and similar for lot size and garage. Comparable number 2, again, I consider this one overall superior to the subject again, and that's primarily due to the build and finish quality. It's got a similar or superior reno and brick exterior. The effective age is a bit lower, and it has some superior extras. Comparable 3, I considered this one overall inferior to the subject. And this was primarily because it has no garage, it had an unfinished basement, and it had less extras. Another unique feature about this property is it has no off-street parking, and there's no space in the front of the lot to put any parking, and there's no lane as well. So we'll notice later on the adjustment grid that this property actually adjusts out lower than everything else. And that is likely due to the fact that there's no ability to put off-street parking on this property. Comparable number 4. Again, I consider this one overall inferior to the subject. Comparable 3 and 4 were chosen because this one has vinyl siding. And again, this one doesn't have vinyl siding, looks like it's metal. It could be vinyl, but it's not brick. This one was chosen primarily due to its inferior, primarily due to its effective age and lack of extras. So moving on to our valuation sheet completed with the comparable sale data, I've highlighted the adjustment lines in yellow here. So any areas where you see larger adjustments, those are going to be features that are more superior or more inferior to the subject. So if they're bracketed, that's a downwards adjustment. So that would mean a superior feature. And if it's a positive, that means it's an inferior feature and we're adjusting it up. So this worked out to an adjusted value range of $512,000 to $564,000. So that's the range that I would expect our subject property at 112 Cope Street to eventually sell for. Now, some concerns we might have with this process. I'm valuing it from my desktop. So I haven't gone by and inspected the property. I haven't viewed it. So there may be things I don't know about it. Photos can be taken to show the best of a property. What are the photos not showing me? There may be some issues with the property that aren't shown in the photos or described in the description. And I'm located in Calgary, so I'm not as much of an expert in this market as I am in my home market, where most of my experience is in appraising. So that's also going to be a concern on my result here. So again, that comes into knowing your abilities and knowing your biases. If you have more experience in the market you're purchasing property in, you'll likely be more confident in your evaluation of a property. But if you're moving into a new market, maybe you should be a little more conservative on your valuation on a property. And this one, just the comparable number 4 here as well on the second slide. Just moving into some common valuation mistakes I run into. Clients miss adverse influences a lot. They don't notice that their property is on a busy street or that it's near a highway. Choosing comps that are too dated, generally over 6 months old. With the HPI index, time adjustments have become much easier to do than they were in the past as an appraiser. But it's always better to have more recent data because it's telling you where the market's going. So not being aware of a market changes is another one. Assumptions about neighboring houses, we went over that earlier. Not knowing your subject or your comp house sizes. A lot of CMAs I see from realtors in Ontario don't include the house sizes. So it can be hard to know if the comps that are being shown are twice the size of your house or half the size of your house. So it's always important to know as much as you can about your property as well as the comps you're selecting to compare to your subject property. And making assumptions based on general terms. It's a realtor's job to get the highest possible price they can for a property that they're selling. So a lot of terms like fully renovated or fully updated, you can see those in MLS listings. But there's no standard definition for those. Fully renovated might mean they replace all the flooring in the kitchen, but all the electrical, plumbing, furnace is still original. Another realtor may say the same thing, but he means that everything has actually been updated. The property was actually fully gutted. So you always want to do your due diligence and check into the details of a property. This slide just goes over some resources that can be used to gather data on your subject and your comparable properties. Your local MLS board. If you're a realtor, you can have access to that. But if you're not, use your power team. Use your realtor. House Sigma is a good free alternative. A lot of good data in the GTA area, and I know they're always expanding into new markets. MPAC is where you would get your dwelling size. You can also get lot size and other details there. It's pay-per-use service. but you can pay to minimally get just your dwelling size. It's their lowest cost report. I believe it's $5 lower if you purchase credits. But if you pay more, you can get other information on the property as well. Geo Warehouse, again, is a good resource. Gives you lot size, transaction history, and other details. Does not provide dwelling size. Again, this is a paid service, and I do not believe you can access as a pay per use. I believe it's a subscription. Municipal mapping services. In each municipality, you can Google your city name, so Hamilton and GIS map. And in most municipalities, that should bring up a tool where you can look at the dimensions of your lot size, zoning, and other features vary by municipality. And Google is your friend. Google Maps and Street View can tell you a lot about a property. There's historical photos on Google Earth that can show you what a property used to look like and what it looks like as their most recent photos. So I think we have some time to go over multifamily, so I'll go over this as well. So multifamily is generally valued via the income approach, but for 2 to 4 door properties, these can usually be supported via the comparison approach. And these are properties that can still be financed via a residential program with most lenders. Once you get into 5 or more doors, generally lenders look at a commercial lending product for you for that type of property. And those properties are generally only supported by the income approach. So the market value via the income approach is generally calculated as the net operating income divided by your cap rate. So the net operating income is your property revenue minus your expenses in general. This is very high level. And a cap rate is a ratio of your net operating income to the property value. Cap rates can be extracted from the market, from MLS listings, or from larger commercial real estate company publications. They generally publish quarterly reports. Colliers, CBRE, other companies like that are good resources for that type of data. Rental rates can be surveyed from local rental listing websites, MLS boards, and private companies. And expenses can be surveyed from real estate investors or property managers, and or extracted from the market. So here's just a brief example of what part of a multifamily income statement might look like. Up here we have our rental revenue. This looks like, in this example, it's a 6-plex. So it's got 6 dwelling units. It shows how many beds, baths, the approximate square footages of the units, what floor they're located on, if there's parking included. It shows the current contract rent and the stabilized rent. And then it's an annual basis here. Over here is a summary of the operating expenses. So you have your property taxes, your insurance, your utilities, an estimate for repairs and maintenance, your management fees, and a reserve fund. And then that gives you your net operating income here and per unit. And down here is an area where rental listings can be reported, similar to the sales comparison approach evaluation sheet I showed you earlier. Just some comments on loan to value and DSCR for multifamily properties. So loan to value is a ratio of the loan size relative to the value of the property. So generally, lenders won't loan more than 75 or 80% the property value. DSCR is the debt service coverage ratio. This is a ratio of your net operating income to your annual debt payments. So in most instances, a DSCR of 1.2 or greater is deemed acceptable by most lenders. So what this means is your property's income is about 120% of the amount of its debt obligations. And so this number will vary by lender, and it'll vary by property and by guarantor, among other factors. It's important to remember that DSCR may limit the maximum loan to value that a lender will typically write to. So moving on to this tool here, this is a Calvert tool that we provide to our flippers and BRRRR clients. It's an Excel spreadsheet that shows all your operating costs, purchase costs, and profit that you can make on a flip deal. It shows how much cash is needed, the return on cash invested, and how speeding up or delaying your renovation timelines can affect your profit. And this is a tool we can share with the attendees if they wish. Just some quick comments on renovation tips for flipping and maximizing profits. Your goal should be to reduce effective age while adding value to the property. So open concept kitchens, full en-suites, built-in shelving, wet bars, fireplaces, front and back decks, those all add value. New flooring, cabinetry, pot lights, siding, these all reduce effective age, but be careful about materials and color. Replace items that have reached end of life. Windows, roof, furnace. You can do a full cosmetic update to the interior property, but if the roof, the shingles are curling and have reached the end of your life, you're going to impact the marketability and impact the profit that you put into the interior of the property. And I think that is it for me, Deji. Did you want to take it back?
Thanks a lot, Chris. Thank you very, very much. I think at this point, we should all go on the chats, drop those fireballs for Chris. Thank you very, very much for sharing and dropping all these bombs for us. Over the past couple of days, I know that Chris has been pulling very, very late nights. I almost got in with his wife because we were staying up late. So thank you very, very much, Chris, for coming on here. So I hope everyone is having a fantastic time. I think we are still good for time because I see that we are about to hit 8 p.m. So we want to close the first hour of this session. I'm just going to pull up my screen again. Okay. So here's the agenda that we shared. So I think we're good for the first hour. We would resume at 8, so that's in about 2 minutes. Before we jump to the second hour and start with the survey, I wanted to, just remind everyone. And first of all, I wanted to give a shout out, to Paper Boat Investments. I think I noticed that you tagged us, with your story on Instagram. So thanks for that. Anyone else who's interested in coming on our podcast as a guest, please, we have this. So all you need to do is either scan the QR code or click the link that we sent earlier in the chat. All you need to do is follow us, share your experience on Instagram, whether you found a deal or you financed a deal or you facilitated a deal. Share your experience, tag us. Once you do that, then we would go through it, we would reshare it, and would invite you to come share your experience on our podcast. We're looking for more real estate investors to share that experience. So that's one. And then I also wanted to remind everyone that again, if you have questions, we are about to get to the question and answer session. So please put your questions on the comment section so that we are also taking that into account. Okay, so before we start off with the webinar, I just wanted to let everyone know that we are starting a Facebook group. It's a free Facebook group. And as you see here on the page, this is a Facebook group for anyone who is looking to find deals. Now, the context behind why this is coming now is because when I started my own journey, there really wasn't any community that was geared towards wholesaling, that was geared towards finding deals. A lot of the communities are more real estate focused, but this group is not for selling your deals. This group is not another off-market group. It's not a group for disposing of your deals. It's a group for acquisitions. So you have different people looking for deals. There's different strategies that people use to find off-market deals. It could be paid strategies, it could be free strategies, but we have a group here where if you want to connect with anyone else who's looking for deals, you have that opportunity. And very soon, we're going to start having meetups as well. So this group is going to be the medium for that. So if anyone is interested in connecting with like-minded wholesalers or deal finders or realtors, please, follow the link or scan the code and, and join the group, and let's see, how we can find more deals together. Okay, so we are about to start the second half of the webinar, and we wanted to start with a survey, as I shared earlier. So we've done the first hour, thanks to Chris and the Calvert team, for sharing a lot about appraisal. This is something that I really haven't experienced before up until now. So, thanks a lot, guys, for that. More importantly, this is the first webinar that we've done, but we would like to keep doing this. And it could be every month, it really depends. But this webinar came out of a conversation that I had with Ryan from the Calvert team on one of our episodes on the podcast, where, he was gracious enough to share this with everyone and said, the team would be happy to put this webinar together. And we took advantage of that to bring this to everyone. But we wanted to give everyone the opportunity to share their feedback on what topics they would like to see going forward. So this was suggested by Ryan and the Calvert team. However, going forward, there's other aspects of wholesaling that you might necessarily want to learn about. It could be contracts, it could be acquisitions, it could be social media, it could be virtual assistants. There's a lot of things, that we are probably able to share. If we get your feedback, it would allow us to identify who the right person is to deliver that topic and also plan around the person's availability. So we have a link that we just shared. It's only 2 questions. And the question is really just about what topic do you want us to focus on for the next webinar. So again, it's only 2 questions. I think we have a few minutes because our next session starts at 8:05. So I think we have about 2 minutes before we start. So if everyone can click on the link, just share your feedback on what topic you would like us to focus on for the next webinar. The date is not confirmed right now, and that's primarily because we want to identify the topic first, then identify who the right person would be to deliver that topic, and then understand what their availability is. And then based off their availability, we will then set a date. So it's really critical that we get your feedback, on the topics that you would like us to share. So we will kick this off in another 1 to 2 minutes at 8:05, while we give everyone the chance to fill that. Okay, guys, so I think we are about approaching 5 minutes past 8. So we'll be starting the question and answer session very soon. Before we start, we just want to share the different ways that like any of the investors here can work with us, right? Because as webinar is done, we just want to ensure that we keep in touch and we are always connecting. So there's different ways that we work with investors. I wanted to provide some context on a book that I read when I started my wholesaling journey, which was Stefan Anio's book, Money People Deal. And that was really foundational for me because it really showed how for every real estate transaction, there's the money part, there's the people, and there's the deal. And you need all three to make it work. And we are essentially using that concept, to communicate the different ways that we work. So it really depends on what your interest levels are and what your resources are. So for example, if you are looking to deploy capital and you want to, invest in real estate, you want to be a JV partner, you want to be a private lender, you want to partner with us on wholesaling, there's an opportunity to do so. And some of the other slides will share that. If you currently have time and you're looking to leverage your time, there's a term in real estate called bird dogs. I don't really like the term, but it seems like that's the term that everyone uses. And it's really someone who has a deal and doesn't necessarily want to go through the entire acquisition process, or maybe they have other things that they are doing, but they just know someone that wants to sell their house. If you have those types of leads, we are more than happy to work with you. We pay a referral fee, for those types of leads. And then the third one would be if you have a deal under contract, an active deal, you've gone through the acquisition process and you're looking to get a deal assigned, we also work with investors around those lines as well. So those are the three ways we work with investors. I wouldn't spend too much time. This is essentially how the passive wholesaling system works. What you see here is we usually partner with investors. The blue boxes are essentially the roles and responsibilities that we take up. So it's more like active partner, JV partner, where you are essentially the JV partner, and then we are the active partners in finding off-market deals. So that's really what this program is about. I mentioned for the Bird Dog program, if you have access to motivated seller leads, we essentially would partner with you. We would take up the process of acquisition. We would call the seller, would engage the seller, would negotiate with the seller, get it under contract, and we would go through the entire disposition process, pay you a referral fee for passing us those leads. And the third would be co-wholesaling, and that's the process of sharing a deal that you have under contract with us. You have gone through the acquisition process, you've gotten it under contract. Now you want to dispose of the deal. You probably don't have a big enough buyers list, or you want to get more eyes on it. We are more than happy to share across our list, share on social media, get more eyes on it on your behalf, and take a share of the fee. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but just wanted to give everyone, that opportunity in case there was any way that they wanted to connect with us, learn wholesaling, or just work with us in any capacity. So one of my team members would put a Calendly link. So if you are interested in learning any of these three, I'll be more than happy to speak with you guys. So you could just click the link, book a call, and we'll be more than happy to engage with you. So I think from my end, that's all before we start the Q&A session. So let me stop sharing. And I'd like to bring Chris back. So this is how we would handle the Q&A. I know some people have put questions on the chat. If you could maybe send those questions to me privately, I would call out the questions one by one, and Chris would answer. If your questions are not part of the list, please use the raise hand icon, so that as soon as we exhaust the questions on the list, at least we are able to, get to you. So we would handle it from those two angles. We'll start off with the list that people have shared on the comment section, and then once we exhaust that, anyone who has their hands up, we would be more than happy to answer their questions. So give me 1 minute here. Okay. So I'm just trying to get all the questions here. Okay, so I have a question. Chris, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Deji.
Perfect. So what do you do when there is no comparison for similar properties, or if the price changes so much by streets?
So that can be common. Maybe not by streets, but other features cannot be available in comparables that recently sold on the market. So that's where that term I mentioned comes in, bracketing. So if you don't have sales on your street, maybe you have sales on the street that you know is more desirable and prices are higher. Maybe you want to choose a comp there. But you also know that there's the street that's south or north of where you are is generally lower in value. So you want to choose a comp from that street as well. And by doing that, you're going to provide a bracket around the likely value of your property. Now, actually determining an adjustment to make on that, that's probably too complex. I shouldn't say probably, it is too complex for this setting to work that out. That's why appraisers go through a lot of training and education, and work with mentors until we're experienced enough to work on our own. So it takes a lot of time to gain the necessary experience to confidently know what those types of adjustments should be. But if you choose comps that bracket your property, ideally you can narrow that range and get a closer idea, like a smaller range and a better idea of what your property is worth.
Thanks, Chris. So that question was from Mira. I hope that answers the question. So there's another one. Any knowledge of building multifamilies with government funds? I don't know if this ties into appraisal, but if you're able to speak about it.
It doesn't really, but I do know there is a CMHC program for multifamily. I believe it's for renovating and updating older multifamily properties. So it's something we could look up and send out to that attendee if they want more information on that. Okay, cool.
Thanks, Chris. There's another question, and I'm not sure if you might be the best person to address this, or if there's anyone else on the Calvert team that might address this. So it's about the speed of underwriting deals. So I think there was a question from someone around, trying to understand how quickly Calvert is able to turn around a deal. It seems like maybe the person had a deal that took longer than expected, but just wanted clarification on what those timelines look like, for getting a deal funded.
Yeah, I can give a high level answer on that. So we do work directly with real estate investors. We also work with a lot of brokers, and we always respect where the relationship came from. So if a relationship with an investor came through a broker, we're always going to respect that, and we won't end around and cut the broker out. But we will also work directly with the real estate investor, and you don't always have to go through your broker to send us documents and that. I think it's fair to make them aware of what's going on, let them know what's happening. But yeah, we can work directly. We can value properties for you before you make an offer to help you make a better decision, make a better offer on that property. But yeah, just talk to us, talk to your broker. We're always willing to talk.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Okay, there was another question around how old should a sold comparable be, especially in today's market?
So right now, it's okay to choose comps as far back as 6 or even 9 months. But you want to choose the most recent comps you can all the time. Back in early 2020, so the peak of the market for most of Ontario was somewhere around February or March. It varied a little bit. I think Windsor lagged everybody by a month or two.
Yeah.
But when that's happening, generally you don't want to choose comps that are more than 30 days old. We went through a period of significant growth in Calgary at the beginning of 2022. Yeah, no, it was 2022, where I couldn't use sales that were more than a week or two old. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to support where prices were going in the market. So it all depends where the market is going right now. Like the market appears to be generally stable. It's been in Ontario. It's been increasing since the spring slowly. It's made back some of the losses from last year. But I would expect it to turn and start declining as it typically does into a fall and winter market. And as we see more and more mortgages expire that were on the lower 0, 1 or 2% rates that were signed 2 or 3 years ago, those are going to keep expiring over the next 2-3 years. And we're going to see more properties being listed. And I expect properties might start declining again. Hopefully the Bank of Canada helps us out and lower some rates.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chris. Another question was, how do you evaluate a property with a pool and without a pool, but with everything else the same?
So if you have 2 properties like that, that's something that we call in the industry as a paired sale. So where everything about the properties is identical except for one feature. Theoretically, the difference in sale prices between those 2 properties is the value of that pool. It doesn't happen very often though, but.
Okay, cool. There was another question around the cap rates. Can you elaborate on the cap rates?
A little bit. So let me just bring up that slide again. So a cap rate is a relationship between the property's market value and its income. So cap rates are affected by interest rates. So with rising interest rates over the last year, cap rates have also been rising. So theoretically, if cap rates are rising, you should see market values going down for multifamily properties, with all else being equal. But we've also been seeing rents rise. So that's going to counteract the market pressure for values to go down on multifamily properties. Although it's been hard to track multifamily properties over the last year because there has not been a lot of transactions. So what I have been seeing and what some other industry professionals have been seeing lately in the last few months is that market value properties do appear to be, multifamily properties do appear to be declining in value year over year. So we'll see where that market is heading for the second half of 2023.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Chris. And just to point out, like, if any of the questions that Chris is answering is spurring more questions, please feel free to either put the question down or raise your hand or your virtual hand. And then as soon as we're done with this list, we'll just go through to the people that have their hands raised. Okay, so there was a question around the flip analyzer, and yes, we are able to share that. The other question is, can you touch on the feasibility of the 1% rule for purchasing properties? This seems not to be obtainable in the Canadian real estate markets.
I am not familiar with this term. Are you familiar with this, Deji?
So it's more around like comparing like the value of the property, to like what it rents for, and it should be 1% of the purchase price. So, like I guess the person is trying to see if there's any correlation between that and like, the valuation of the property. Like, would you factor in like the rents or the 1% rule in any of your valuation metrics?
Go ahead.
I could also call, so it's Festus. If you want to provide more context around like the correlation that you're trying to drive between the 1% rule and valuation, that'd be good. But I think that's what he's trying to ask.
Yeah, so it's not something that, being unfamiliar with the term, it's not something that I take into account in the appraisal process, but it may be linked to a similar methodology, like a different methodology that I use. But yeah, without understanding it any better, I don't think I can comment on that one.
But that's fine. Thanks, Chris. So we have a couple more questions on the chat, so I'm just going to go through. So Manny has one. How about appraisal on student rentals or rooming houses?
Those are difficult, but so when you're valuing multifamily properties, the way you evaluate them is different than single family properties because they're purchased for different purposes. So it's driven by the market. So in most markets, rents are driven by number of bedrooms in a unit. For areas that might be driven by rooms, like for boarding houses or student housing, like in where's Queens located? Kingston? Yeah, in Kingston, or in like Waterloo, Kitchener, where you have a lot of higher education institutions. You will see property or incomes driven by rooms rather than units. So even if you have, like, say, a fourplex that has 4 2-bedroom suites, the value may be driven by the number of bedrooms rather than the number of suites. So you have to know your market and what drives value in your marketplace.
Hey, Deji.
Hey, Manny.
Chris, thank you for the session. I just wanted to elaborate on that question. I've had declines on the appraisals side, so the banks wouldn't fund it due to being even though the city of Waterloo has approved it as a dwelling unit and have permits, they've declined the appraisal and just right away exited. The banks wouldn't even refinance. Is that typical in your case?
So what I'd say to that is each lender has their own internal underwriting rules. And those are gonna change with the market as their internal rules change, depending on their exposure. So I know most lenders don't want to loan on like illegal basement suites or illegal accessory dwellings. And it depends on the appraisal if it's properly noting that the dwelling unit is legal, if it's articulating that well, and if the underwriter is reading that report properly. So I find in those situations where there may be a misunderstanding is to try and clarify. Like assume that there's just a miscommunication, maybe understand why they're declining. I know sometimes lenders just don't want to take the effort, or anybody just doesn't want to take the effort to explain sometimes why they're saying no. But, I would say always try and push that and see why they're actually saying no.
Can I ask you one question? If I'm taking a house and I want to okay, let's say it's a 3-bedroom bungalow with a basement, and I'm gonna convert it into a 11-bedroom property. Okay, the city allows it. It is gonna be a student rental, but I know the appraisal is gonna screw me over. How do I prevent that happening? Or do I just renovate it as a nicely done up property first? I get it appraised, refinance, then do my bedrooms, add them up, and then I'm good to go. What would you suggest?
I don't think I can comment on what you should do in regards to legal and illegal uses. That's your choice. But as to why the appraisal might be a problem for you, appraisers are like any profession. We may all have the same title, but there's going to be different levels of skill and different levels of experience. So part of getting an appraisal done on your property is doing your due diligence and vetting your appraiser and making sure that they're competent in the job that you're assigning them. You need to know what questions to ask and push them and make sure they know what they're doing.
So I've had the bank decline me doing a secondary appraisal by another company because that's who they wanted to use. And I basically, either I go move another bank or I was out of luck. So I just left it alone. But if I'm trying to be proactive, when I go to a lender, how do I verify the lender will lend me? Do I just be honest, say this is what I'm doing? Or do I, like, is your company a pro student rentals or roaming houses, or how do we know that before we get a roadblock?
Rooming houses are tough. I think they're not a common legal use in a lot of municipalities. So I don't think a lot of lenders have experience with them. So underwriters that don't have experience with something, that's going to seem riskier to them, right? So it's going to be a quicker no. That's a tough one. And then when you bring a deal to a lender, generally you won't have control of who that appraiser is going to be because it goes out through the system and gets assigned to an appraiser. But theoretically, you should be working on the commercial side for a product like this. So you should have more influence on how that progresses. And you should be able to push to have your own appraiser provide an appraisal for you on that type of deal.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Manny. So we have another question. Approval process qualifications with Calvert on vacant land for development on new builds.
Ooh, that might be outside of my scope. I do know our loan to value limit is much lower on vacant land. I think it's around 50%, but I'm not certain on that. And I know we don't do a lot of new construction. We've had some bad experience with that. Personally, I would like to see us do a little more, but it is riskier for us, and it is more overhead doing property inspections, making sure you're progressing. So it is riskier from a lender standpoint on new construction. So it's something we have less experience with, but it is something we're looking at getting into a little more.
Okay. There was another question around the comment that you made on the illegal living space in the garage.
Okay.
And the person wanted to, find out like how an illegal unit essentially affects the valuation of a property. Does the illegality have a negative influence, or does it have a positive influence?
Generally, an illegal suite will not have a negative influence. And it may even add value depending on the market. I mean, you're going to get some value from the extra kitchen. There's going to be value from that because it has utility. So that garage living space, if it was improved to a higher level of quality, it may have made my decision tougher of how to value it. But it looked like they just painted the walls and put in a fireplace heater. So it wasn't very improved. It still looked like a garage. But if they had actually put flooring in, finished the walls with drywall, painted them, textured the ceiling, made it look like the house did, then it's easier to classify that as a living space, even if it's illegal. I could see it adding more value to the property.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. There's a question here, and it's possible that you touched on it with your last comment on the ARV. So, hi, Chris, could you please touch base on Calvert's lending based on ARV versus current market value? Do you typically find 75% based on ARV? Or I think, do you typically fund 75% based on ARV? So I guess, the question is more around what loan to value in this market, you typically funding for your deals.
So I believe, again, this is a little outside of my scope, but I believe we do lend up to 75%. And that is, I believe we are unique in the industry, and that is that we do lend up to 75% on the ARV for flip and BRRRR financing. But it depends on a lot of things. It depends on the applicant, how much money you put down, your down payment, how good your renovation plan is, how confident we are that it can be achieved, all those factors. But we can definitely, I can put you in touch with one of our underwriters, and they can answer that question much better than I can.
Thanks, Chris. The next question was around, so this is for me. It's around the clauses that we put in our assignment agreements, in the APS and the assignment agreement. So I'll just take a stab at this quickly. So on the APS, there's a couple of standard clauses, that go there that we almost never change. So there's going to be a conditional clause, and that clause could essentially be any condition you want. The goal is to buy time. So whether it's a due diligence clause, or it's a financing clause, or it's a clause to get your lawyer to approve the deal or your partner to approve the deal. What the clause is for is irrelevant. It's really the fact that you're buying time. So it's a conditional contract. It's not a firm contract. So that's one clause that you would have there. So I actually have the APS, pulled up here. And then there's also an assignment clause. So that's the clause that allows you to actually assign the deal. Now, inherently in Ontario, and you could speak to your lawyer to confirm this, even without the assignment clause in the contract, all Ontario's contracts are assignable, like inherently. So you don't technically need the clause in there, but a lot of our clauses are already pre-filled and they never change. So the assignment clause is usually there as well. It just allows you to assign the deal. More importantly, it limits your liability once you assign the deal. So it's written in a way where once you assign the deal, the liability is taken from you and it's transferred to the buyer. So that's the second clause that's wholesaling specific. The third clause would be the number of walkthroughs. So it could either be 3 or 5 walkthroughs, depending on the state of the property. If you believe that the property needs a lot of work and there'll be quite a number of walkthroughs for people to make a decision, you could ask for 5 walkthroughs, so that in process of selling the deal, if you do 2 or 3 walkthroughs, you still have about 2 walkthroughs for the buyer who's closing on the deal. So that would be the top 3 for me. There's a few other ones that are key in Ontario, for example, vacant possession. So you almost don't want to buy a property that has a tenant in it. The vacant possession clause gives you the confidence that the deal would not close until the property is vacant. So that's another clause. There's quite a number of clauses. I think you could literally write anything into the Schedule A as long as it makes sense and it can be legally bound. So you could send me a private message or reach out to me. I could walk you through those clauses. So the next question would be, so I think you already answered this. Would the illegal suite give any extra points in appraisal for properties that we buy? So I think you already answered that, Chris.
I think so. Yeah. The only extra value you're going to see from those is if there's extra, like if there's a kitchen built in, the extra bathroom, maybe if you've put in a separate like walk-up entrance into the property, into the basement suite, you'll get value from those improvements. Okay. And Pravin, I think your question is next. You also have your hand up. Do you want to ask it yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Deji. Yeah. Hi. So I have one couple of questions. The first one is regarding appraisal and inspection reports. So most of the times, with regards to the multifamily, sellers are providing appraisal and inspection reports. So can we rely on those reports? And if we can rely, then how old reports you guys actually accept?
Should you rely on the seller's appraisal and inspection reports?
Yeah.
That's a judgment call you'd have to make. I mean, that's not a relationship that you have. It's the relationship that the seller has with that appraiser and inspector. So there's a risk there that there may be some bias. There shouldn't be theoretically, but we know how the world works. So I don't know if I would theoretically rely on the seller's documents unless I trusted that person.
Okay. And in general, how old, we should consider, let's say if I have a 1-year-old appraisal report, does the lenders consider them?
Sorry, the appraisal report's a year old?
Yeah.
Generally, no. It varies by lender how old of an appraisal report they'll accept. I know it's generally within the last 3 months. Some will accept up to 6 months old, and it'll vary by property, but.
Got you. Okay. And do you guys finance the deals without a kitchen?
Do we finance deals without a kitchen?
Yeah.
Can you clarify? Like a finished house?
Yeah, no, sometimes, people actually caught up in the renovations, and then in mid of the renovations, they want to, assign a cell, right? So then there won't be any kitchen. So.
Yep. We'll look at those deals for sure. I mean, that's part of what we do. A lot of the properties we finance that are being renovated and flipped are in terrible condition. So maybe they still have a kitchen, but they probably don't have any floor. They got stains all over the place, all kinds of damage. So it's a deficiency in the property, just like any other deficiency.
And then last one, a property with a pool and without a pool. So is it a superior or inferior if all other details are actually same?
In Ontario, that's a good question. I don't think I have enough experience appraising properties with pools in Ontario to give you a good answer. In Alberta, generally a pool does not add value to your property and can detract from it. The only time I've seen it add value is when you get up into luxury homes where it's tough using prices in Alberta compared to Ontario, because you guys will think this is nothing, but generally the highest prices you'll see in Alberta will be in like the $2, $3, $4 million range for like the top end of houses. And when you get into that range and you have a pool, then it's something that add value to the property. But for a typical house, generally in Alberta, the pool detracts from the value.
Okay. And while doing the appraisal, do you guys consider the mechanicals of the property, like the system of the, like some heat pumps or some advanced ones or the older pumps? So do you guys consider them?
Yes. Yeah. It's part of the improvements. And if it's near its end of life, it's going to detract from the property's value. So we have to consider all parts of the property, all components.
Okay. Thank you. That's all from my end. Thank you, Deji.
Thanks, Praveen. Chris, we have a question around the flip calculator. So it looks like you might need to pull it up because the question is around one of the cells. So does your flip calculator subtract the original deposits and all other expenses from the profits in the H block of your flip calculator?
H block. I'll just share my screen there again. I think we're talking about this area here. So it should, so where it says, so the flip analyzer takes into account your financing costs, and we typically roll our fee into the financing costs. So it would be included in that profit calculation. Yes.
So I think the question was around the original deposits.
Oh, around the original deposits.
So that would fall under the total cash needed, right? So
yeah,
Ed,
that would fall on the total cash needed. Yeah.
So Ed, if you are still on the call, do you maybe want to clarify, did I get the question correctly, or is there some more context you want to add? Okay, so it's possible that he dropped off.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris. So the next question, does our credit score impact the interest rates that Calvert offers?
That's probably outside my scope. So, but I think it would. But we do, like credit rating isn't the biggest factor we look into. So we do look into, we do loan to investors with lower credit ratings. So it likely will impact your rate, though, I would imagine.
All right, thanks, Chris. Manya, you had your hand up, and there's a question that you wanted to ask about appraising on 2 lots.
Yeah. So my question is this. So in Ontario right now, because the prices are so high, rates are so high, we actually have to, a lot of people, what they're doing is building tiny homes in the back of the lot, right?
Okay.
And depending on how big your lot is, you can actually build a full-on house, right? So my question is, we're looking at this property right now. It's got a full house, right? It's outdated. We'll renovate it. We know where that's gonna fall, but the lot is so deep. It's 150 deep. We can build a full-on size similar house, duplex it. Now, let's say the renovations, construction cost. So say the purchase price on the new house is $850,000. We're gonna spend $150,000 just for renovating it. Now we want to build a secondary home in the back, and we're going to spend $600,000. But that's me. That's what we know how much the expense is going to be. How does somebody come and appraise it for me so I can, evaluate that? How do you guys do that yet in Alberta?
I haven't seen that in Ontario yet. I know that, you're like province wide, you're allowed to build a secondary suite on your property.
Right.
But what you're saying is, it sounds like you're going to build a duplex property or a duplex dwelling.
So yeah, what happens, most people don't, like, you have a smaller size lot, right? It might
Yep.
be like 120 feet deep by 40 or 50. So you'll do a little tiny home, one floor, you know, you're gonna do 2 bedrooms. That's about it. That's for the most part. My
Yeah.
question is, how do appraisers appraise that on first and foremost? And secondary, how do appraisers appraise 2 houses on the same lot?
So that's going to be tough because it's not a very common occurrence, especially having a duplex. But
Even if it wasn't a duplex, like a single house, a 4-bedroom house, 2 bath, and a full-on basement.
yeah, so it's not a common thing to come across in the appraisal industry. The only time I've seen 2 houses on lots is generally out on acreages. But you can approach it using the cost approach, as well as valuing the lot itself, estimating what the value of the land is. For the situation you're describing, it would seem like it might make more sense to sever off part of the lot.
You can't sever it because the lot depth, I guess you could, the width is like 80 by 150, but it takes out, you would have to tear out the front house. You have to tear it
Not
down.
enough,
It's
there's not
away.
enough space to
Not
get it
enough
right.
space there. Right. So you could do it like one house in the front, one behind it, right? Because there's a lot more depth to it. One more factor in that equation is there are homes there that have been fully renovated, are worth $2 million, just a home.
Yeah.
So is that a good thing that there is $2 million appraisals there, or not necessarily? Because who wants 2 houses in the same lot?
That's a good question. Yeah, I wonder if you would struggle with getting that approved, if they would need approval.
Legally, it's approved automatically because of the bill that passed. You can build duplexes, triplexes nowadays on any lot.
Yeah. So like one way to value it would be, so like valuing it like a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex. So via the income approach, how much income could be generated from the property, however many dwelling units you have there between the 2 houses. Because there are multifamily properties that have multiple buildings on them that you just value as one because they're all on one lot. So that would be one approach to take. But as a single family home with an accessory dwelling like that, that's a very unique case. It sounds like you're on the leading edge of where the market could go, I guess.
Well, I'm also trying to understand, like, you know, we're seeing more tiny homes. So how are appraisers appraising them? You know, a lot of guys, like, so far they build them, they rent them. I haven't seen appraisals come back yet to know, or I've seen them sold off, and you know they'll transact at like $1 million. Normally, the single house would be a duplex, and then a tiny home with just 1 floor transacts at 1 million, 1.1. Normally, a duplex would only be like 800K. So the value, depending on where you buy it, is not there, you know? So I'm just trying to see if you guys are familiar with that, because it's going to become more and more popular.
Yeah, well, we're not really familiar with that right now. I haven't seen that yet.
So if I'm shopping for a bank that would fund this, how would I go? What's the best strategy to go about that? If I'm talking to you guys,
it's a good question. Maybe ask them the questions you asked me. See if they have better answers, I guess. But yeah, it's a tough one. You're gonna look for someone that's willing to take on. It's more risky, right? Because it's unique. So if something goes awry, I mean, if there's an error on the appraisal if they lend on the value that someone appraises it at, there's more risk on if that's correct or not, because the appraiser is likely not going to have good comparable sales for a property like that. So there's going to be a lot more extrapolation, like working past values we know and estimating where the value could be.
He wouldn't appraise it just for 2 houses? Like, here's a nice house.
Well, no, because you can't sever it, right? So it wouldn't be the same as appraising two, like the value, it wouldn't be the sum of two houses on two separate lots. Because there's more options to sell those properties and options to like improve those properties because they're separate lots. So
Yeah.
you're all on one lot, so you have to sell it as a unit.
Okay, and one
Okay.
last question then, if you don't mind. So if some people are tearing down tiny homes, like smaller bungalow war home bungalows, and they'll build two side by side semi-detached homes.
Yeah.
With in-law suites, or is that more up in like easier to appraise?
Yes, that is very common in Calgary. When I started working in the Ontario market, I was surprised by how often really old and small and I don't know, not very nice homes are fully renovated. Instead of in Calgary, homes like anything under 1,000 square feet in the inner city is generally bought to tear down and to put up two semi-detached properties. And I know it's common in some markets in Ontario, but it's not common in all of them.
Right.
Cool. Thanks, Manny.
Thank you.
No problem, man. So I think the last question that we have here is on retrieving phone numbers for sellers. I personally don't, have a tool for this. So there's different ways to go about this. If you have the address that you're looking to find the seller for, I've heard about sites like Canada411.ca, where you could do like a reverse phone lookup, find the phone number for that address, or something like that. Again, I'm not too sure. I haven't done that extensively, but yeah, that's all I know for phone number retrieval. If you're looking to get in touch with the seller and you don't have the phone number, but you have like the name of the owner, you could check on social media to see if you could get that, like their profile online, and just reach out to them. But outside of that, I'm not aware of any tools that allow you to retrieve a seller's phone number directly here in Canada. There's privacy laws to sort of prevent that. Okay, so it looks like we have cycled through all the questions. I just want to reconfirm that I haven't missed anyone's question, and if I have, please could you raise your virtual hand? Or if I didn't miss your question, but you have a question, could you raise your virtual hand? We are good for time, so I think we have 12 minutes left. If we don't have any questions, we could essentially give everyone back their time. But if anyone has any last-minute questions, please raise your virtual hand so that we can address them. We want to ensure that everyone leaves with all their questions answered. Okay, so it looks like we are good with the questions. So at this junction, I just want to say a big thank you to Chris and the Calvert team, for essentially making this happen. Thank you very much, guys. And also to everyone who came for this webinar, and for everyone who stayed till now, because staying for 1 hour, 50 minutes, it's not easy. It's not easy. So I want to say a big thank you to everyone who started at 7 and are still here at 8:50. If anyone wants to reach us, where to reach us. I'll just put this up here again. If you are looking to connect with us, please reach out. We'll be more than happy to connect with you. All the links that we shared, they are on the chat. As soon as we close the meeting, you would lose access to the chat. So if you want to get any of those links, go through the chat now, take those links, copy them out, and keep them, so that you wouldn't lose access to them once we close the meeting. So again, if you want to reach out to us, you could reach out to us on IG. That's where we usually are most active. And if there isn't any other question, we just want to say a big thank you to everyone for coming And we would review your feedback for the next webinar, and we would announce shortly, what topic we'll be focusing on. So again, thank you very much, guys, for staying with us for 2 hours. Have a great evening ahead.